Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Dram show with me, Chris Goodrum. Right, this evening, okay, it's that time of the year, isn't it? It's, you know, winter is well and truly set in. So it's that kind of time of the year when you want something a bit more robust, a bigger dram, a sherry dram. That's what we want. We want a bit of sherry. So that's indeed what we're looking at this evening. But aha, you say, I hear you say, you don't particularly like sherried whiskies. Well, that is not strictly true. Yes, as you're probably well aware, it's not my most favoured style of whiskey. I do prefer the American oak-aged whiskies. I find that certainly with the younger age statement sherry cask whiskies is that the sherry just blankets. You know, you don't get any distillery character. All you get is a sort of an almost kind of homogeneous sherry character. But in saying that, once a cask has got a bit of age to it, although, like I said, you don't get an awful lot of the distillery character, you do start to get some of the secondary characteristics of aging in sherry casks. You get the dried fruits, the licorice, the chocolate, the coffee, the toffee, you know, all these kind of things. And when it gets that sort of nice dusty old kind of character, you know, sherry casks can be rather wonderful. And certainly some older sherry cask expressions like Tomatin 40, for example, off the top of my head, was absolutely fantastic. You know, the other big issue, obviously, with distilleries that tend to use an awful lot of sherry cask is the S word. There's no getting away from it. I mean, you know, distilleries may well claim that, you know, they source their sherry butts and, you know, hand source them and pick them up and all this kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, the vast majority of sherry butts are still cleansed with sulphur candles, and no matter how careful you are with the use of this, some of it is going to get into the wood. And, you know, most, or not most, maybe a lot of distilleries that do use sherry cask whiskies, you know, run the risk of that happening. And I have tasted a number where the whiskey has been, you know, either, you know, just a little bit of an off note, right the way through to being, you know, horrendously stinky. I mean, I've tasted some old Bunnahabhain from the 80s, which is just reeked of sulphur, you know, and it's not good. It shouldn't be there. I mean, there are people that like that, and there are people that you know, that maybe don't know so much about whiskey, think that this is how sherry cask whiskies should be. Well, that is not the case. You know, sherry whiskies shouldn't be. They should be nice and clean, and without that kind of character. So anyway, yeah, we're looking at sherry whiskies this afternoon, and firstly, I would like to say a big thank you to Alistair from the Ben Riach Distillery Company for sending me these samples. And no, we're not tasting Ben Riach, we're actually tasting Glendronach. Why would Ben Riach be sending me Glendronach samples, I hear you ask? Well, that's because in 2009 they bought the distillery and had a big revival of the range, you know, and all that kind of stuff, like a lot of new owners tend to do when they buy distilleries, and you know, rejigged the range, brought out some older expressions, all that kind of stuff. So let's we're having a look at some of them this evening. So a bit of history about the distillery. The distillery itself was founded in 1826. Went through a few hands until we got to 1960, when it was bought by William Teacher and Sons. Now, like a lot of distilleries, their history is all key to the sort of the big mergers and takeovers that happened, certainly in the late 60s, 70s, and 80s. And Glendronach itself is no exception to that. I mean, in 1976, it was bought by Allied Distillers, for example. It was then mothballed 20 years later in 1996. Before being bought by Shivers Brothers, or otherwise known as Pernod Ricard, who owned Shivers Brothers. who bought Allied Domecq and therefore bought the distillery with it. So you know, a lot of shifting of ownership around, certainly, and that was in 2005. 3 years later, 4 years later, it was then sold to Ben Ryack, who are the current owners. It's, from reading the history, it's like I say, it's, since 1825, it's only been closed or mothballed for, you know, for 20 years, so or so in that period of time. So it's pretty, you know, been pretty much in operation ever since the day it was founded. So you know, long tradition. A lot of people love Glendronach. It's a very popular whiskey. So shall I introduce this afternoon's lineup then, shall I? Right. Okay. So like I said, the distillery's kindly sent me these samples. The first one we'll be looking at is the original, the 12-year-old original, bottled at 43%. Now, I have tasted this on a few occasions, and the last time I tasted it, there was a bit of an off note there, it has to be said. So yeah, we'll see what happens when we get around to tasting it. This is quite interesting in that it is aged in a combination of Oloroso sherry and Pedro Ximénez sherry. So no distillery character there whatsoever. And actually, another interesting fact is I don't think I've ever tasted an American oak aged example of Glendronach. I mean, a lot of distilleries that do tend to use a lot of sherry casks do tend to do some stuff in American oak. I mean, Glengoyne is you know, a good example of that, but you very rarely see sort of American oak age, pure American oak age Glengoyne other than in the independents. And from what I've tasted, it's not that great, it has to be said. But anyway, I digress. Second one we're looking at this evening is the 15-year-old called the Revival, bottled at 46%, aged in Oloroso sherry. Third one we'll be looking at is the 18-year-old called the Allardyce, bottled at 46%, and again aged in Oloroso sherry. And finally, the last one we'll be looking at is this one, the 21-year-old, otherwise known as the Parliament, bottled at a slightly higher ABV of 48%, and again aged like the 12-year-old in a combination of Pedro Ximénez and Oloroso sherry. So that's this afternoon's little lineup. So let's see what the 12-year-old does then. Right, okay, let's look at the nose on this then, shall we? Well, firstly, there's no off notes. There's no sulphur. It's very clean, which is pleasant. Lots of sweet licorice, treacle, molasses. It's a lot of the PX cask is coming up first. Now I'm getting a little bit of the sort of the more herbal Oloroso, some bit of spice, a little bit of dried fruits, raisins, sultanas, that kind of thing. There's an edge to it. I mean, as you know, it's a Highland distillery, and most Highland malts do tend to have that little bit of a granity character, and it's got a bit of an edge to it. I wouldn't quite say I'm getting those kind of granity notes, but it's certainly got a bit of an edge. And I must say, this a lot improved since the last time I tasted this particular bottling. So that's good. Palate. Wow, silky. Wow, sweet though. Very, very silky. Kind of starts off with more of the Oloroso character, the slightly herbal sherry, and this sort of treacly, licorice, molassy character starts to come through on the middle and towards the finish. Really quite citrus on the start of the palate, which does have a sort of a cleansing kind of character. And I mean, and although it's not a whiskey I'm going to sort of rave about, I think, you know, it's pleasantly balanced. I think it's got some nice character to it. Like I said, if you're the sort of person that likes sherry matured whiskey, for a 12-year-old sherry, it's got some complexity. You know, you get the elements of both casks, and you get that lovely citrusness, and the aftertaste is really nice. It's chocolatey, it's rich, it's, you know, yeah, I mean, it is a good winter dram. Okay, on to the 15-year-old. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then. It's a little bit more, or it's a bit less complex, I should say. It's more, yeah, I'm getting herbal Oloroso, I'm getting some dried fruit, it's got a little bit more noticeable maturity to it than the 12-year-old, but it's just a sherried whiskey. There's no, I mean, it's very good, there's no off notes, but there's no nuance to it. I mean, I will give the 12-year-old and say that it had a nuance, it had complexity. This just strikes me as being a sherry aged single malt. You know, it's not bad, it's just what it is. Yeah, I'm getting some citrus now. Again, it's got that slight edginess to it, but palate. Again, as a whiskey, it's pleasant. It's kind of sherried whiskey by numbers, you know. It's herbal Oloroso, bit of treacle, bit of toffee, bit of coffee. Got a fresher finish, it has to be said, but then obviously it's not got the PX cask coming through with the really heavily molassed sweetness, so it finishes a bit fresher. There's, yeah, okay, maybe I get a little bit of granitiness on the finish, a little bit of that austere kind of character, but yeah, it's kind of sherry by numbers. Like I said, you know, not bad, but just sort of like, it's not something that, you know, it's really going to excite me. So so there you have it. That's the 15-year-old. And on to the 18. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Oh, that's deeper. A lot more maturity. Getting sort of that dusty oak. It's a real rich, juicy, moist fruit cake. Raisins, sultanas, a little bit of crystallized citrus, maybe crystallized orange. Loads and loads of warm spices, those sort of, you know, broad, warm spices. Oh, it's really juicy. Again, absolutely as clean as a whistle. No off notes. A little bit of a perfume, a little bit of a light violety note. Head and shoulders above the 15-year-old, I think, in quality. It's got a lot more complexity. Again, no distillery character, but then we're not expecting that. And so what we're looking for is you know, wood character. We're looking for complexity from that, and the maturation, the oxidization of the spirit, which gives you that dried fruit, as does obviously the sherry. That is a lovely nose. I think for a sherry cask whiskey, that is absolutely gorgeous. I really like it. It's rich, it's moist, it's pungent, but it's got a lovely classiness to it. You know, it's not sort of completely what you would say really natural and stinky, and it's not uber polished and you know flat. It's kind of somewhere sort of nicely in the middle. You're getting a little bit of natural character, but you're also getting some of this sort of polished character as well, and a little bit of polished wood as well. What we're talking about polish. Yeah, I think this is nice. It's now starting to get quite chocolatey, giving it a bit of air. Certainly is bringing out that sort of chocolatiness. Palate. Wow, that's a chewy mouthful. Moist, unctuous. Loads and loads of fruitcake again. Raisins, coffee. A little bit of that sort of oxidative kind of character creeping in now. The sort of slight sub-Armagnac-y kind of note to it. A little bit of violets, a little bit of floralness. Again, got a nice citrus and granity finish. You know, I'm guessing. I mean, there is a correlation, and you don't taste it so much on the 12-year-old because obviously, again, the PX kind of like seems to be the emphasis on the finish, but there is a citrusness there and a little bit of granitiness. There's certainly some of that on the 15, and there's certainly some of that on the 18. So it kind of leaves a nice dry finish. You know, it's not too sickly. Well, it's not sickly at all. It's not sickly sweet. It just finishes, you know, with a crispness and a granitiness that you kind of expect from a Highland malt. So yeah, I think that's quite impressive. I like that. That's good. Right, okay, on to the final bottling of this afternoon, the 21-year-old. Let's see what the nose gives us. That has got some lovely maturity. A lot dustier, even getting some sawdusty vanillins. I mean, just because it's an American oak cask, not American oak cask, a sherry cask, doesn't mean that you don't get vanillins. You just don't often tend to sort of smell them because the sherry character tends to be the sort of, you know, the more noticeable, should we say. But I'm getting a little bit of that. I'm getting a real Armagnac-y dried fruits, a lot of oxidation character, a little bit of treacle, some chocolate, a little bit of herbal, sweet herbal notes, violets. That is lovely. That's lovely. It has complexity, and at the end of the day, like I keep saying, that's what I want from my whiskey. I want complexity. Whether it's, you know, the complexity gained from cask and distillery character, or whether it's just cask orientated, whether it's old American oak, or whether it's, you know, old sherry or whatever, you know, you just want to stick your nose in the glass and you want to go, oh, what am I smelling, you know. And this certainly has got it by the bucketful. Again, quite fresh, and it has a real granity edge to the aromas. Lots of licorice. I mean, I could keep repeating myself, to be honest with you, but I think you can smell it's not sort of not mega old, but it's got some lovely maturity. It's got, like I said, a lot of oxidation character. And it's just a lovely nose. Palate. That has got a real granity finish. It almost completely sort of wipes out the sweetness from the PX cask. But again, you're getting some nice herbal Oloroso moments, some nice treacly PX character, dried fruits, fruitcake, spices, but that really finishes fresh. I mean, partly down to the fact that it's bottled at 48%, that little bit of extra alcohol certainly adds freshness to the finish, and it kind of like, you can feel it here on the tongue, and it kind of pushes the sweetness out towards the side of the mouth, which is what I like. I like, you know, I don't want to sort of like have a sweet, sort of slightly sickly mouth feel when I've finished tasting a whiskey. So so yeah, very, very good, really impressive. Lots of wood character, lots of wood complexity, and I'm guessing, like I said, a bit of distillery character, although you can't taste it. It has that sort of freshness, that granity character certainly on the finish. So, so yeah, I think I like that. That's not a bad whiskey at all. Right, okay, so let's sum this little tasting up then. Glendronach, well, it's not too bad really, is it? You know, you're probably expecting me to sort of slate it completely because of what I've said in the past. And, well, first off, no sulphur blemishes whatsoever, you know, absolutely clean as a whistle. It doesn't mean that every bottling that they produce is untainted, but these 4 samples, you know, that's all I can go by. What I've got in front of me certainly show none of that taint whatsoever. The 12-year-old I think is pleasant. It's a pleasant 12-year-old. It's got some complexity from the 2 different types of sherry cask, and yeah, it's not too bad at all. The 15 I'm not so keen on. I don't think it's got the complexity. It's just seems to be, I think, maybe an awkward kind of age for it. Like a lot of whiskey, you know, sometimes it takes just that little bit longer. You know, like Spring Road, for example. You know, it sometimes can seem a little bit unbalanced, a little bit sort of awkward. You know, under say sort of 15, 16. And it certainly seems to sort of, you know, back up the theory on this one, that I just don't think there's enough complexity and character in the 15. It's a pleasant whiskey, but it's fairly linear. The 18, on the other hand, I think is really good. It's, you know, you're getting some maturity in now. You're getting some of the oxidation character, some of the sort of dried fruit, rancio, almost like Armagnac. It's got some complexity from the wood, and it's got a lovely, you know, fresh finish. So again, you know, good whiskey, can't argue with that. And the 21, I think, obviously the standout bottling of the 4, but you kind of expected that, I suppose, to a certain extent. Really, really well balanced. Again, you're getting the character of both woods, and you're getting an exceedingly granity, crisp, fresh finish. So, you know, all in all, I think this is quite a really interesting tasting, and it's certainly the first time I've tasted sort of anything other than the distillery bottle 12-year-old. So, and I know that that's you know, quite popular in the shop. So hopefully, when I get stocks of both the 18 and the 21 in, they will be equally as popular. So keep an eye on the website to if you're, you know, into your sort of like your sherry cask whiskies, and you know, I'll obviously sort of well, they're up there at the moment, but you know, obviously marked as coming soon. So hopefully they won't be too long before they're in stock. So so yeah, big thank you to the distillery, to Ben Wright, for sending me these samples. Hope you've enjoyed this episode of the show, and I hope you think you know, it's been an interesting tasting, and that I've you know, given it a fair crack of the whip, so to speak. So until next time, good dramming, and good afternoon.